السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Last class, we had just one more sentence to read regarding al-awani. So we'll finish that and then go into the next section. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. So we covered the conditions for men and wearing silver and gold or using them, as well as silk. And when it comes to women, women have the uh, additional ruling of being permitted to wear gold and silk in ways that men can't. So he says, رحمه الله ويجوز للمرأة لبس الحلي ولو نعلا فاستعمال كمورود وسرير. He says it is permissible for a woman to wear adornments, meaning gold that is used to adorn, even if it is a sandal. So he said that there is a difference between gold and silver when it is being used as an item versus when it is being worn. So wearing it as a woman, whether bracelets, earrings, on your clothing as buttons or silk or golden threads. And he says, even if it is a sandal or a shoe, لا استعمال, not usage. So even for women, it's impermissible to use as a vessel. And we discussed what a vessel is. Last class, we said things such as cups, forks, and we said that this ruling extends to all usages. And he mentioned some examples. He said, such as a hair comb. So a woman, she's not allowed to use gold or silver, even if in a hair comb, because that is not does not fall under what is adornment, does not fall under al-hali. So it is not permitted for her to use it. And similarly, a bed. A woman cannot sleep on a bed, with gold or silver in it. So the restriction for women using gold still applies when it comes to usage. And again, we discussed last class that the underlying cause for the impermissibility for men and women is not that it's tashabbuh bin nisa. It is not impermissible for men because it is similar to women, because even for women there is restrictions. And we said that the reason is that it is excessive usage. It is unnecessary use of wealth. And that's why for women, even when it comes to usage, it is not permitted. As for why it is permitted when it comes to al-huli, why they are allowed to adorn themselves, because it is considered a natural thing. It is not considered excessive for a woman to adorn herself with gold. Rather, that is considered something normal and expected of her. As for silk, ويجوز لها لبس الحرير واستعماله. So when it comes to silk, she's allowed to use it, unlike gold. So a man cannot use silk. He cannot sleep on a mattress of silk, whereas a woman is permitted to do that. ويحرم على الذكر البالغ لبسه واستعماله. And it is impermissible for a man to wear it and use it. And we discussed last class the difference between something that is pure silk, harir, and al-khaz, what is partially silk, partially a different fabric. And we discussed that it is makruh. The next subsection. We discussed water, we discussed najasa and how it is removed. And we discussed the vessels in which the water being used what they can contain. Even though, again, when we talked about gold and silver in vessels, we extended it to clothing. But the original usage of this subsection in this place is to discuss it as a vessel for water in tahara. So the next subsection in tahara is mujibat al-wudu. Also في mujibat al-wudu. What makes wudu obligatory? So obviously wudu is obligatory when something that requires a state of طهارة is wajib. ما لا يتم الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. An obligatory task that is required to fill another obligatory task, or sorry, better translation, what is needed to fulfill an obligatory task is in itself obligatory. If salah is, if the timing of salah entered, and you need to do salah now, you don't have uh, time left, then it is obligatory to do wudu. If you are in Hajj and you need to do tawaf al-ihram, you need to do tawaf, actually, depending on what type of Hajj you're doing, you need to do tawaf in general, and tawaf, you have to have tahara. You need to be in a state of wudu, just like in salah. So wudu then becomes obligatory. These are some things that make wudu obligatory. However, what is meant by the title of the subsection uh, is more so what things cause you to leave a state of wudu. So if salah time enters, you are sitting uh, in the congregation in Jum'ah, and the khatib gets up, and you have to fulfill your obligation of uh, praying Jum'ah, but you're already in a state of wudu. Does making wudu become obligatory upon you? And the answer is no, because what makes wudu obligatory is really leaving the state of wudu. It's not just what you need wudu for. Leaving the state of wudu is what makes wudu obligatory. So what is really being mentioned here are the things that make you leave the state of wudu. And he says, مُوجِبَاتُ الْوُضُوءِ ثَلَاثَةُ أَنْوَاعٍ. He says the things that make wudu obligatory are of three types. The first one, الأحداث. أحداث وهي الغائط والريح والبول والودي والمدي ودم الاستحاضة. أحداث, as we mentioned a few times, hadath in Arabic means an incident or something that occurs at a specific time. Hadatha in Arabic is a verb. It means it happened. Hadatha hadith, an incident happened. And the reason these are called ahdath is because they are things that occur in a specific time, which are different from asbab. Asbab are a little more complicated. I'll get to it in a bit. So the ahdath are defecation, passing gas, urination. Al-wadi, al-madi are two fluids that come out of the private parts during different circumstances, which we'll get to, and dam al-istihaba, the blood of menstruation. So there's a general rule in which we can discern when ahdath break wudu and when they are not really ahdath. And we mentioned this rule in the lessons of al-Akhdari. We said that وخروج المعتاد من المكان المعتاد على الهيئة المعتادة. It is the regular thing leaving from the regular place in a regular state or in a regular way. So every human naturally passes gas and urinates. These are regular things. They have a regular place for a healthy person. People who pass gas, they pass gas, from the same place. People don't pass gas, from their nose or ears. So there is a regular place and there is a regular way. So there is a healthy way for it to happen. On the flip side, there are unhealthy things, certain afflictions, certain medical afflictions that may cause these incidents, these ahdath, to leave in an unregular way. So we have three conditions. First of all, the thing has to be regular. The regular place for, al-bawl, urine, to leave from is the private parts in the front. If something irregular comes out of the urethra, it's not any of these things. It's something irregular. Let's say, let's just assume stomach acid, even though, it's not a normal thing. But that's the point of what I'm saying is that if a non-normal thing comes out, then that does not break wudu. If some kind of, stomach fluid comes out of the urethra, that's a sign that there's something wrong. That's not a normal thing. Therefore, it does not break wudu. The second condition, as we said, it has to leave from the regular place. So urine is a regular thing. However, if it comes out of an irregular place, so if you urinate from your backside instead of your front side, the urine itself is normal, but it's not coming out of the regular place. So if that were to happen, it would also not break wudu. Similarly, some people, a more regular, normal circumstances, some people, if they're having some kind of surgery in their bladder, if they're having some kind of sickness in their guts, they may have a bag attached to them. They may have some kind of, um, a tube, you know, uh, that goes inside their system and attaches on the outside to a plastic bag through which they urinate. The act of urination for that person is normal. They're still disposing of their body's waste, but it is not coming out of the normal place. Therefore, if you are urinating from that bag, you would not be breaking your wudu because that is not a regular state. Uh, that is not the regular place for it, for that person. However, if you are a person for which that is your regular place, meaning if you are a person who has some kind of condition in which that bag is attached to you for life, or at least for a very, very long time, that place, meaning the tube attached to the bag, that place will become the regular place for you specifically, right? Because that's the regular place for you, for your circumstances. If you are that person, if you have some kind of medical illness in which you have this thing attached to you, that is where you would know whether your wudu has broken or not. In the same sense, if you are a person who has that bag attached to you and your urine for whatever reason is coming out of your urethra, as a normal person would, then for you that does not break your wudu. Even if it breaks wudu for most people, 99% of people who are healthy, it only breaks wudu for them because it is normal for them. However, if it is not normal for you, then it does not break wudu for you. So, خروج المعتاد, it is the regular thing, leaving from the regular place على هيئة المعتادة, at a regular, in a regular state. What does it mean in a regular state? Urine, or let's look at a different example. Seminal fluids, for example. Seminal fluids leave the, frontal private parts. Whether you're a man or a woman, they leave at certain times. They can leave during your sleep, which is ihtilam in Arabic, and they can leave during the occurrence of shahwa, the occurrence of, the natural instinct to be attracted to someone. It can make these fluids leave. However, if it is leaving in a scenario in which none of these two things are involved, you're just walking in the street, you're completely alone, just walking in the street, and then suddenly you notice some fluids are leaking and coming onto your clothes. This would not break wudu for you because it is a regular hadath. The thing itself is regular and it is coming from the regular location, but the state in which it is leaving is not regular. The hay'ah, the way, the reason it's coming out is not regular. It's not something normal. So again, the circumstance itself has to be regular. So that is the general legal maxim that you can use when you want to figure out whether your hadith has happened or not, whether your wudu has broken or not. Because most people at some point or another will have some kind of irregularity, specifically with the third condition. that it will leave from in a state that is not normal or not the regular state of it. So you don't have to memorize every single instance. And these are the action, these are the, kind of the motivation behind why legal maxims, legal rules, al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya, why they were created. It is when the fuqaha took all of these circumstances. So they look at the, ahadith. They look at this mas'ala, the ahdath. They look at all the verses pertaining to it, all the uh, hadith pertaining to it, all the qiyas pertaining to it, and they apply it to the usul, and they come out with all of the different fatawa and legal rulings. And they look at all of them, and they realize that there is a legal rule which you can use to summarize all of them, under which all of them apply. So instead of memorizing each different ruling, you can memorize the rule as a whole. And from memorizing this rule as a whole, then you can know the ruling, even if you don't memorize the specific thing. So something happens to you, and you don't remember reading about it or listening or hearing about it. You apply this rule to it. Something has happened to you, you see, is this a normal thing from the normal location, and is it leaving in a normal state? If the answer to all three is yes, then you know that your wudu is broken. Now, al-gha'it, defecation is pretty self-explanatory. Passing gas as well is pretty self-explanatory. When it comes to urine, urination, as we mentioned, when we talked about removing physical najasa, urination does have a specific irregular state that occurs to more common than anything else, which is salas al-bawl, which is the leaking of urination. This, as we mentioned, can happen to people of old age. When you reach your 60s, 70s, some people they have less control over their body, and some things just you lose control of. This is something that salas al-bawl is one of the main things that has to be covered, which we will in a bit. But to cover all the other things, al-wadi and al-madhi. Al-wadi and al-madhi are two fluids that come um, out of the frontal private parts. So there's actually three different fluids: al-wadi, al-madhi, and al-mani. But al-mani is not mentioned, and we'll say why in a second. So al-wadi is a very transparent, thin liquid that comes out of the private parts, and it is not associated with, sexual actions. Rather, it is usually from pressure applied to the area, either to the private parts or to the prostrate under it. It can happen from lifting heavy things, very heavy things. It can happen from certain types of physical activity that can apply pressure to that place. It can also come out with urine or without urine during specific types of sicknesses, which aren't very common nowadays. But what's more common nowadays is, again, if this happens to you, it's more likely going to be from lifting heavy things. A small amount of fluid would come out. It's very water-like, and this is called al-wadi, and it breaks the wudu. Now, when it comes to the fluids that are related to sexual attraction, there is two: al-madhi, which is mentioned here, and al-mani. So the same word, but instead of the dal, it's a nun. Al-mani, the reason is not mentioned here is because al-mani breaks wudu, but it also requires ghusl. Whereas al-madhi, it only requires wudu. So technically, al-mani also breaks your wudu, because anything that requires a ghusl, anything that takes you into a state of janaba, you've lost your tahara kubra, you've lost your larger purification, so automatically you lose your minor purification, your tahara sughra. Now, al-madhi is the thing that comes before. It is what comes from just attraction. It comes from just usually thinking about intercourse or looking at something, um, looking at something that would attract the person, and is a more thin liquid, whereas al-mani is what is known and is the more thick white liquid. So the first one that comes out in chronological order breaks wudu, and if the actions of intercourse are continued, eventually it would reach al-mani, which would break tahara kubra and would require janaba, not just wudu. And the last thing is dam al-istihada, the blood of menstruation. And there's going to be obviously a section on menstruation and the rulings pertaining to it, and the ghusl that comes after and all these things. وأسباب. So we mentioned that there's three categories of things that break wudu: ahdath, accidents, and asbab. Asbab in Arabic means reasons. Actually, let me just check the question. So yeah, before we get into that, let's just answer this question that was asked. Says Sheikh, what is mu'tad defined by urf, as in the regular way that it comes out? So I think I answered it. The mu'tad is basically the hay'a mu'tada, the regular way of it coming out is basically the healthy way, the way that the bodily function is expected to happen. So again, uh, al-madhi, it comes out from a known way. It's a very expected bodily response to a specific thing, which is attraction. Whether just thinking about it or looking at something or listening to something, it's pertaining to attraction. If al-madhi comes out without any of these factors, so it's coming out in an unexpected way. You're just walking on the street and then suddenly it's just there. This is the opposite of al-mu'tad. So um, it's defined by the urf of basically uh, not any particular field or group. It's defined by the urf, meaning the ahkam al-adiyya, meaning what some people might translate as scientific rulings that are based on observation. Um, so al-madhi, we know when it comes out and why it comes out based on repeated observation of the human body and how it functions. It's not mentioned in a specific text that this is what al-mu'tad means. Mu'tad is XYZ. Rather, we know what is mu'tad based on observation and repetition. So al-asbab, the second thing that breaks that wudu is al-asbab. Asbab means reason. And the reason why we call them asbab is because these things that break wudu here, they do not necessarily or are not necessarily thought of to break wudu in themselves, but rather because they are a reason for something else. What do we mean by this? So, ما غطى على العقل من نوم ثقيل أو غماء أو سكر. Something that covers the mind, such as heavy sleep. The reason heavy sleep breaks wudu is because it is a reason for ahdath. Meaning, if someone is in a state of heavy sleep, it can be assumed that gas will come out. And the reason is because when you fall into a state of sleep, the muscles around that area relax, and so gas is expected to come out, whether a little or a lot, or even if it doesn't happen. Because it is a reason for it to happen, it is considered a breaker of wudu. So if someone is in a state of heavy sleep, right, he falls in a state of heavy sleep, and there's a friend beside him, and he sleeps and then he wakes up and then he asks his friend, did I pass gas while I was asleep? And he says no. His wudu is still broken. So even if it's called a sabab, the hadath that could happen, it doesn't matter if it happened or not, because this is a breaker of wudu in itself. Now, what is meant by heavy sleep? The fuqaha differed over the type of sleep that breaks wudu and doesn't break wudu. Some fuqaha mentioned that what matters is the position of the body. So some people say that if you sleep sitting up or leaning against a wall or a pillar, then it doesn't break your wudu. Um, that's not what we consider in the madhab. What we consider in the madhab as the division between heavy sleep and non-heavy sleep, meaning the sleep that breaks wudu and doesn't break wudu, is defined as Imam Malik said specifically, if that person is sleeping and something were to be dropped beside him, would the sound of that wake him up or not? If it does wake him up, he is not considered to be in a heavy sleep. Sorry, if the sound does not wake him up, then he is considered to be in heavy sleep, and for that reason, his wudu would be broken. However, if someone is sleeping and a pillow were to be dropped beside him, he would immediately wake up. That is not considered to be heavy sleep, and his wudu is not broken. So it's not about someone actually dropping something. I don't need to drop a pillow beside you for your wudu to be valid. The person himself should be able to discern when he wakes up what type of sleep he was in. If he is unsure, then it's most likely heavy sleep. Someone who just closes his eyes for a few minutes, on the couch or in the masjid against the wall. Sometimes they just go into a state of light sleep and then they wake up from the sound of something and they know they are in a state of light sleep. So the person should be able to know on their own based on this criteria, which is whether they would wake up from a sound beside them. And obviously, a sound that would wake up both the light sleeper and a heavy sleeper is not what we're talking about here, such as a fire alarm, because a fire alarm would wake up anyone. What we're talking about is regular sounds. So is the sleeper aware of, the light things that are going on beside him? That's why I used the example of a pillow dropping rather than, something like a fire alarm. So al-asbab, anything that shuts the mind from heavy sleep or passing out, meaning fainting, or being in a state of being drunk. These things are all considered to equally shut the mind. And when these things happen, ahdath can happen without the person knowing, and so they're considered to break wudu. The second sabab, ولمس من يلتذ به عادة إن قصد اللذة أو وجدها. So to touch a person from whom they would regularly find pleasure. And there's sleep to be made here. There's distinctions to be made. I'm not sure if I can cover it in time. But let's cover this next time because it takes a bit of explanation. Before we wrap up for today's, so there's a question. Sheikh, can give a proper definition of translation to junoon and sukr. Is there any conditions or a term for when someone becomes crazy and how is it determined? So again, junoon is it's when the mind is shut, basically. But we're not even talking about junoon here. We're talking about ighma, talking about fainting. So being unconscious. Junoon is a different thing. Junoon has its own implications on many other things. Ighma is self-explanatory. Fainting is self-explanatory. Sukr is, again, being in a state of drunkenness. So when your mind is closed, uh, when there is a state of rishwa or a state of being uplifted um, for no reason, this kind of happiness that comes with drunkenness. Basically, anything that would necessitate, the had of sukr being applied to you. It's not that strict of a definition. Pretty much, it's urf. The person, it's clear. It's based on language. The person is known. The person himself, when he's drunk, he knows he's drunk, and the people around him can all tell. It's very obvious. So sukr, we define the three things that three characteristics of it when you're talking about physical najasa. We said that it shuts the mind, and so it affects the mind, it affects the senses, and the third thing is again that state of rishwa, that sense of not highness as in on drugs, but that sense, the sense of happiness being uplifted by the effect of it. So these are the definitions of sukr. And inshallah, nobody needs to know these definitions because they do not, go around sukr. So the strict conditions of it wouldn't be that important to them, hopefully. Like, we'll begin next class with the asbab. We'll continue on the asbab uh, we did not mention this time for time constraints. So we'll see you all Monday. Feel free to ask any questions to me personally. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام.